I kind of think this is our new way. John did such a great job the other day of opening the class in person for the group here, not just a head on the screen for the people in the class, but right here. So welcome everybody here and welcome everyone who is online today. For those of you who are new here, our class will last about 90 minutes. Guy will be giving a 60-minute talk. We'll take a short break after that, and then we'll have a Q&A where you can speak directly to Guy with your questions or impressions of the talk, or really anything about your inner life is welcome. So if you have online any technical help, if you have technical help here, we can't help you. But online, if you have technical help, you can go to the question box on your control panel, or you can email Kate at support@guyfinley.com. Also, if you wish, you can write a question to Guy in the question box area, so feel free to do that. And then finally, a reminder that all these free online and in-person classes are sponsored by the nonprofit Life of Learning Foundation here in Southern Oregon, where Guy is the director. And first of all, we want to thank all of you who regularly help these efforts with your donations. Thank you. But if you'd like to help us, and know that, first of all, every donation that you make, no matter the size, helps us to reach out to others around the world with these teachings. So all donations are tax deductible in the U.S., and if you'd like to do that, go to the link on the website, guyfinley.org/donate, and you can do that at any time. All right, let's get started with class. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to read the topic and the key lesson. Cancel any negative reactions with one simple realization. Here's the key lesson. Negative reactions have no awareness of themselves at all, which means not only are they blind, but neither have they any awareness of how they are complicit in the continuation of the pain inherent in the condition they protest.
That's why Shakespeare wrote, "Methinks thou dost protest too much," incidentally. Just a little side comment. Good morning. Welcome everyone joining us online, as Doug said. One of the problems with being as old as the speaker is that lots of my reference points belong to things from times way before most of you were even born. I was a child of the 60s, which in part explains my behavior. But so many of the things that I grew up with, when I want to use them as reference, you have to be at least, I would say, 55 to 70 or older like myself to be able to remember them. How many of you remember MC Hammer, for instance? Oh, good. Well, we're going to have a little fun today. We're going to look at something that we're going to call hammer time. My wife is talking to me. You'll forgive us while we have a side conversation. MC Hammer. He was an early black icon, a rap, not really a rapper so much as he was hip hop. He introduced a certain kind of dancing. He was a pretty flamboyant character, delightful. Enough on MC Hammer for now. Our topic is negative reactions and how they can be canceled, or more accurately stated, used and transformed with a simple realization that we're going to arrive at today. And you're going to see, those of you who are here, hope everyone's joined us from wherever they're coming, I'm going to give you the actual first physical representation in real time of the unconscious mind in the throes of a negative reaction. It has never been seen before. I'm dead serious, although it will be somewhat humorous, and you'll understand the reference to hammer time when we get to it. So let me start with this simple idea before I bring up my actors. In fact, my actors can come up now. Keep the camera on me for the meantime, please. There are certain passages in Scripture, I can think of some in the Dhammapada and the Gita, and certainly Old Testament and New Testament, actually every true Scripture, that just kind of stay with you. At first you don't know why, and I can tell you that if you're attracted to any particular spiritual truth, it's because you have a corresponding part of yourself waiting to be opened up by the understanding inherent in that passage when it was written. The man or woman who wrote or said that thing had an epiphany of a certain kind that they were able to put into very few words that conveyed on the spot the whole meaning of something, the entirety of it. And it's up to an aspirant as they come across these things, if and as they do, to explore it, to work at understanding what's behind that. And you'll find it's a little bit like those elephants that are encased in each other, what I know what they call those things, where one is within the other and so forth and so on. And in this instance, St. Paul said something along the lines, he said, I don't do the good I would, instead I do the evil I would not. I don't do the good I would, instead I do the evil I would not. Now, inherent in that short phrase is a complete description of his awakening awareness to a consciousness that is set against itself. In that one little phrase. Because on one hand, he's saying, I don't do the good I would. I mean, I know what the good is, but I don't do it because instead I do what I would not, which I know I should not. But I am helpless. But I have no choice. I'm aware of it, but I am still unable to step into the moment where that consciousness is about to act out what it does in spite of me knowing I should not because it's not good for me or anyone else. Do you understand what I'm saying, everybody? That's what I want to look at with you. And just to set the stage for our act so that you understand why I have these people here. Haven't you ever marveled? How is it that I can't remember that I love you? That I am your friend? How come I can't remember that before I say or do something that has no love, no respect, no kindness in it at all? I only know afterwards, after I've done the evil I would not, after I've spoken the cruelty, after I've acted out something that I know is punishing. I only know it punished you after I did it. Why don't I know it before I do that? That's what Paul was saying. Can you make that connection with me? We're going to examine that in great detail today. So let's have our actors come on the screen. There they are. The Life of Learning acting troupe. You're looking at Ralph and Wilma. And with the conditions today, I'll let you guess which is which. They've been married for 30 years. And usually when they sit down to dinner, they have a certain conversation, and this is no different tonight. So that in the course of their dialogue, Wilma decides to ask, a little bit reluctantly I might add, as you'll see why, how the long postponed doctor appointment that Ralph had with a new doctor went. After all, she wants to know, given the fact that he's had appointments with other physicians recently that did not go well. And it troubles her for a number of reasons. And with that, we'll bring our actors into the scene.
So, how did it go with your new doctor? Better, I hope, than it went with your last 3 appointments.
Yeah. You know how these things go.
Not really, but knowing you, I can guess.
What's that supposed to mean?
Oh, never mind. So, when's your next appointment?
Pretty sure that's not going to happen.
What does that mean?
Well, what does it sound like? I'm not going back there. I never want to see that man again.
Why? What happened?
Well, for starters, his bedside manner, the worst.
How so?
I didn't like the way he spoke to me.
Really? Why?
Well, for starters, he told me there was no point in trying to help me if I wasn't going to help myself first.
Well, that seems reasonable to me. Did he give you a prescription of any kind or some kind of direction to get you started on the right foot?
Oh, yeah. And I can tell you what I told him.
Oh, my. And what was that?
I told him he was completely wrong.
Really? Just to be clear, didn't you and I agree that you would go see him so that he might look at you and hopefully diagnose whatever it is that's been bothering you for quite some time now, I might add?
I suppose.
Well then, how about telling me what he told you you needed to have done?
Well, he said there's a particular process to the kind of healing that I need, and that the first step was up to me.
Well, that sounds encouraging, honey.
Sure, easy for you to say.
Really, Ralph, what on earth could be so difficult that you won't at least try to see if it works?
Well, believe me, that guy did not know what he was talking about.
Really? How can you be so sure that you know better than he does?
Because he told me that I'm too quick to get negative. That I have a tendency to overreact. I mean, imagine the nerve.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I mean, can you believe it? Come on, you know, I don't overreact. Hey, wait a minute. We're not done talking about this.
Oh, believe me, we are.
Reality TV at Life of Learning. So in that little act, what did we see? What is it that's going on? What did it reveal about Ralph that Ralph doesn't know about himself? Clearly, do you understand Ralph doesn't know anything about Ralph? So the simplest way that I can define that quickly so that we can move into our study, and I hope that you'll stretch to at least take it in, if not understand it. We live in a world in which our experience moment to moment is where the past almost never stops crucifying the present moment. That's an apt analogy, metaphor for everything across the board, spiritually speaking. Why was Christ crucified? Why were any of the prophets hung, slaughtered, murdered? If they were true, all they spoke about was love, kindness, being true to oneself. Why would they be slaughtered? And one day you'll see that idea, or blessed are you that are reviled in my name, because you'll start to see that there are parts of you that turn on you and rend you because you want to begin to live from a different order of consciousness that isn't related all the time to the past, trying to prove or protect itself. And so you'll see that the pain of the moment is because some part of yourself, long gone, caught up and created in a body of energy that is decrepit and corrupt, never-endingly trying to crucify the part of you that wants to live in the present, where that nature has no authority at all. You'll see it yourself if you haven't already seen it. How many of you can suspect what I'm saying? The past crucifies the present. Let's see how that's true. A little review. Most of you have been with me for a while, but those of you who aren't, let's get everybody on the same page as quickly as possible. We've studied this quite a bit, so I'll throw it out. What is it that comes before any negative reaction? Resistance. Say it out loud. Resistance. And what is the nature of resistance? First, something resists, then negative reaction. What's the nature of that resistance? How will I ever understand the nature of a negative reaction if I don't understand the source of it? Do you understand? So what's the source of that resistance? Okay, a lot of voices, but I'm going to cut through just to make it simple. The source of all unconscious resistance is unconscious comparison. Always. The source of all unconscious resistance is always unconscious comparison. And what does that mean? Unconscious comparison. It means whatever the nature of the moment may be, and we know that that never stops. Whatever the nature is, that moment has been judged and found guilty. And judged and found guilty of what? Now I ask you, what is that moment judged and found guilty of that I'm summarily resisting it?
Doesn't match an image.
What are these moments guilty of? They're not the way we've imagined they're supposed to be. Period. So look at the summary. Instant resistance produces this reaction. The resistance that we have that produces the reaction is that something in our consciousness that was there before the moment took place, some content, some thought, some image, some belief is there, and that moment comes along and it does not match, it does not measure up to whatever this body of thought, belief, opinion is. And when it doesn't match by comparison, then it is summarily resisted. And we have the reaction, which is the attempt to escape the result of a consciousness measuring a moment, not liking its own measurement, and throwing away what it sees by blaming something outside of itself for the pain it experiences in that moment. And how many of you will agree with me that there are, every single time a negative reactions come up, is there not pain with every negative reaction? Yes or no? Yes. Can you have a negative reaction that doesn't have pain in it? No. This morning, we're going to unwrap negative reactions. And based on our discoveries, the realizations they give us, we're going to learn what it means to be someone who understands what has been an unconscious relationship with our own nature so thoroughly that the light of that understanding will literally cancel out the captivity that these reactions produce. And let's just touch on that one more time. Am I not a captive of every negative reaction? I mean, I have to be a captive of a negative. If I lash out at someone, if I say something cruel, if I do something harmful, and I know that I wouldn't do that if I were present, that means that I'm captive of something the moment before I start expressing whatever it is that I do. So, again, we know no negative reaction exists that isn't preceded by some form of resistance. Yes? So we have a couple of main points to understand. Take a nice deep breath. First, and I hinted at this, can I experience this resistance to whatever the disturbance may be? And you can make a list of all the disturbances that bring up this summary, no, I don't want that, no, I don't like that. Can I have any relationship whatsoever to that resistance, to that disturbance, without whatever it is that's resisting that disturbance already being a part of my consciousness? We alluded to that, did we not? So that whatever it is that disturbance is, and the resistance I feel, it means that this object, this nature, this thought, this feeling that was disturbed had to be there before the moment came to disturb it. Yes or no? This is an important point, to understand that this resistance to the disturbance is there before we are aware of ourselves resisting something. This is so important to understand. That thing that has the resistance built into it goes with me every step of my life. It is hidden in this labyrinth of unconsciousness where it awaits without us knowing it awaits for something that when it touches it, stirs it, and when it is stirred, it always produces resistance because it feels threatened by the disturbance. Understood? So before we can hope to know anything at all about these negative reactions, let alone escape the captivity, we have to understand something about the interior workings of a consciousness we presently have no insight into at all. We're pretty much what we call hapless. You know what that means? It means that I go into a moment with no idea at all, that I walk into it, what do they call it? Not a hairspring. No, it's not spring-loaded. Never mind. I go into that moment, a hair trigger. How many of you are aware that you have a hair trigger? And it's not Bosley. I have a hair trigger, just like that. You have to see how extraordinary it is. Because we don't, you understand? We're so used to being passive in the moment to the onset of this sudden resistance that by and large, instantaneously, that resistance hands itself off to the negative reaction that comes out of it. And that negative reaction already knows exactly why I feel the way I do. And it tells me why I feel the way I do. Oh, there it is again. Oh, they're like that. There she is. So in a heartbeat, there's no awareness whatsoever of the fact that this negative reaction came out of this body of unconsciousness filled with these hair trigger images and beliefs that the second that they're stimulated or triggered, boom, I am now doing not the good I would, but the evil I wouldn't, because I am unconscious to the fact that something has come and carried me off, trying to protect itself or prove itself otherwise. Still with me, everybody? Simply put, we have no consciousness of a reaction until the reaction's occurred. Now just think for a moment what that means. I have no awareness of a reaction until after the reaction has taken place. That means, if you understand it, that as long as that condition remains in place, as long as that's my relationship to my own consciousness, that I will never be anything other than someone who doesn't do the good he would, but always does the evil he would not, and then tries to fix what he did by explaining why he reacted as he reacted. Our hope lies in an awareness of that consciousness that is unaware of itself. Our hope lies in an awareness of an unconscious nature that knows nothing of its own content or what it does. And if you can't see that, this is the wrong place for you. Do you see that or not? Now, first let me tell you, and I always butcher this word, unequivocally. Unequivocally. Stop there. Get it while you got it. I tend to add syllables. You are created with a light that dwells in the darkness and a darkness that knows it not. That means that you are created with the capacity to be present to the consciousness that reacts instead of made its prisoner after it does so. Again, that's where our hope lies. in a God-given relationship to our own consciousness that is above the consciousness that we have been given. Another order of consciousness, a higher kind of awareness that is present before the reaction takes place. That is present before the reaction takes place, just as the sky is there before a cloud moves through it. It is in the awakening of that new order of awareness that we begin as human beings to fulfill the possibilities we've been given, which is the transformation of that consciousness that does not know itself and cannot, but that can be transformed through the light that reveals it as it is, and what is required of us as human beings to surrender that relationship to that light so that that transformation can take place. Still following me, everybody? So I want to look first at the simplest form of reactions. Take a nice deep breath. I don't know when you had a physical the last time, and I don't even know if they do this anymore. Again, this may be old hat. But when you used to go to the doctor and have a physical, you would sit on a bench of some kind. He'd ask you to cross your leg. You'd cross your leg, and then he would take usually a little hammer of some kind. This isn't MC time yet. Take a little hammer, and what would the doctor do with that little hammer? He would tap your knee. Now, unless you were a zombie, which is what he was testing for, when he taps your knee, what do we see? An active force is applied to a passive object. The passive object being part of an interconnected involuntary nervous system. An involuntary nervous system, so that when the doctor touches that part of the knee comes up, it responds, because there is something active. It touches something passive that is designed to react so that the doctor can see the system is still intact. One time I tried consciously not to move my knee, and he kept hitting it harder and harder. Finally I said, "I'm just playing with you." He knew me, so he somewhat appreciated my humor, not totally. But here's the point. All that's quite mechanical, isn't it? Clear? But what about a negative reaction? Try to follow. Physically, little hammer hits the involuntary nervous system. Involuntary nervous system responds, knee jerks. What is the active force with a negative reaction? Try to see. Can you see there has to come something to produce a reaction, yes or no? What is the active force? What is the hammer that's delivering the blow in that moment when I have a negative reaction? You understand the question? It can't be the event. Isn't that what we see? Instantaneously, I react. Now, extraordinary as it should be seen, that my explanation of the reaction always follows the event, and the event is always found at being faulty. Because if it wasn't a problem with the event, I wouldn't have that reaction. Failing to see that the I having that reaction didn't exist until the reaction came. So the I trails the reaction. The I doesn't give birth to the reaction, it trails it. Do you see this? It can't be the event. Here's the proof that the reaction that we have can't be the event. If it was what you said or what they did, if the whole world, how many of you ever get negative at a restaurant? Yes or no? Raise your hand. Waiter's not fast enough. Yes. If the cause was the waiter being inconsiderate, then in the moment he was inconsiderate and you were having that reaction, the whole world would be negative in that moment. If the event was responsible for the reaction, does the whole world get negative because your waiter doesn't tend to you properly? So it must be something quite personal. Yes or no? What's the hammer of the moment? What's delivering the blow? This is what we're going to look at. Basically speaking, what is delivering the blow is our conditioned perception of that moment. Slow down. What's delivering the blow, the hammer in that moment, the active force producing the resistance to the reaction, is our conditioned perception of the moment, which is what? What is my conditioned perception of that moment that I don't want? That my conditioned perception is that I already have a conclusion to how that moment's supposed to go before it takes place. So what is it in that moment, ultimately, the hammer? What is the hammer delivering the blow to? What's the hammer? The hammer is my view of how things should be, and they're not the way they are. So that suddenly I see that moment as a threat. There's the hammer, the perceived threat, yes or no? I told you I was going to give you a demonstration. Here is a hammer, here is a block of wood, and here is a nail. I don't know if you can see it. I had Charlie make me a big nail, but I can't possibly do what I want to do with it at the same time. I can't. Well, yes, I can. Hold on. There we go. Hammer. Hammer. What's the hammer? What is the active force in that moment in me that's delivering the blow? An expectation. And what is it hammering? It's hammering a nail. What's the nail? The expectation. So literally, my consciousness is hammering itself. The hammer is the moment in which there is a summary rejection that I don't know is a rejection of the moment because something in me sees that event as a threat. But the event it sees as a threat doesn't exist without the identity that feels threatened by it. Please, can you understand that? So here's the part of me that's active. Here's the part of me that's passive. Hammer time. My mind actually beats itself up because the mind clings to something it says should not take place because it knows in advance that nothing should challenge what it sees and thinks. So in the moment that it doesn't, this consciousness trying to, how do I say this? Trying it as best it can acts out what it believes should not be taking place, which is the reaction to that moment. I don't know if I'm able to make you see this, what I'm trying to show you. Can you? Not only are we, who creates the hammer? Who creates the hammer? This consciousness has created the hammer, hasn't it? So not only has this consciousness created and unconsciously wields the hammer, look, resistance. Resistance. The resistance is built into the consciousness. It's not my resistance. The resistance belongs to a summary identification with a process of hopes and thoughts and beliefs, opinions over time, and not even just over my time, built into the consciousness itself. So when that identity is met with something that threatens what it needs, it feels immediate resistance, and that resistance wields the hammer. But what we don't see is that what this hammer is working on is that identity with whatever it is that it's trying to get nailed down. If you can't see it, I've failed with trying to present this. We think we're the hammer. Yes or no? I'm going to do something. We think we're the hammer, but we think the nail is the condition outside of ourselves. The condition outside of ourselves that we're going to hammer back into shape or fix is not outside of us. The condition that we think we're going to fix with a hammer is the content of our own consciousness resisting what the moment has revealed. And so without seeing it, I am the hammer and the nail, and the pain that comes out of the delivery of the blow of a consciousness set against itself, that consciousness experiences directly. And the more it feels the hammer, the more it feels this divisive act of being in conflict and trying to create a new world by hammering on it, the more it experiences the pain of that. What does it do? The more it hammers. Exactly. And it creates this cycle over and over again by which it has no clue whatsoever that every time it hammers something to clean up whatever it is, all it does is create more wreckage. You see it. I was going to nail it into this wood. I have to. There. I have to use the props. Now, just that in itself. When I get angry with you, I'm going to hammer you into shape. Yes or no? Fight or flight. And can I hammer you? By the way, I do, because you're part of that system, where every blow that I deliver, ultimately to myself, the pain of which I experience, that I blame on you, you feel that pain and you hammer back. How will anything change in this world until a human being actually begins to understand that at the onset of that resistance, that which they are about to pick up and wield and do what they have to do, the good they would, that isn't good at all, but rather trying to get that wood of that life, that moment, to shape up in that moment. Every blow they deliver is first and foremost to themselves, and then the world reverberates with every sledge, with everything that happens, and everybody feels it, and nothing changes, and all that gets worse is the pain. Till we see that, until there's an entirely new relationship with this unconscious mind, these negative reactions, the resistance will continue to rule our lives, wreck them. How many of you understand from your own experience how many times you have hurt someone else or yourself through what we call an involuntary negative reaction? Yes or no? And yet can you not see that you always have a reason why you did that? How can I have an explanation? Why would I ever justify hurting another human being? Why? Because, first of all, I am not the one in the throes of that reaction, but I am identified with the consciousness that has it. And when that consciousness explains itself to itself, being identified with it, I believe that it is I who am explaining the situation, and therefore I am consoled by my own explanation, and it is not my explanation, it is not my justification. It belongs to a consciousness that is set against itself and does not know it is set against itself, and whose pain born of that conflict produces nothing but more and more hammers. What do you think these laws are? What do you think this litigious world that we live in? What do you think every law is? Every law is a new hammer. Every law is a new hammer. To do what? To ensure that the nail, you, this and them and that they're no longer going to be a problem. So the more I bang on the nail, what happens? The more of a hammer I need, because the pain doesn't go away. The intolerance, Everything that's hateful and cruel about humanity doesn't go away because everything human beings do to get rid of it produces it, enhances it. And it's not until we see that we are the unconscious co-creators of a conflict that continues to mount that there's any chance that that consciousness will begin to go through the process of seeing itself as the propagator of that pain. Still with me? I got to go on. We're going to look at what would be this new understanding. You're being given it. I hope that you understand that. I hope you never again have a negative reaction that you don't remember hammer time. And that you feel the hammer that you throw. Not wonder whether somebody else feels it when you throw it. Doesn't everybody deserve the blow you give them? Don't you think that? Why else would I do it? I'm going to fix you with my hammer. Yeah. Nice deep breath. Gentle transition. Do you need someone to tell you, like for instance, I don't know what that bright light is outside, but I don't hear rain. Do you need somebody to tell you how gorgeous it is when the sun is out, especially after rain? All that grass going, oh, I love this. You know, everything clean, shiny, everything up bright, perky. Do you need someone to tell you that that's beautiful? Do you? Why? I know it sounds silly. Why don't I need somebody to tell me when something's beautiful? Because I know it when I see it. I know it when I see it. I know harmony when I hear harmony. I also know disharmony when I hear disharmony. Nobody taught me harmony. I know it though. No one taught me beauty, yet I love it. So the point being, if we understand beauty, harmony, when we see it without having to take thought, ready? How come I don't know what is bitter and poisonous or even dangerous when I see it, let alone when I am the instrument of it? Pretty simple question. I know it when I see it. I know everything about what I see, except I don't know anything about my negative reactions. I don't know what they are doing to me. I know when I see the beauty, I know what that's doing to me. It's making me happy. But when I see this pain, I have no clue whatsoever about why it is that I feel punished about it. Because why? Because I believe I'm separate from the thing that I see when I see something I don't want. Now, next step, building on that. There is what we can call an instinctual, call it a natural fear, which would be what? An impersonal reaction common to all creatures, which is a feature of consciousness itself. Let me finish. And it's there at every single level. Predators know that there are certain color frogs you don't ever bite. Now, did Mother give that little fox an education on don't bite this little poisonous frog? Did it? How about the bird? Did the bird tell its little baby, when you see these caterpillars with all these little sticky things sticking out and they got this bright color on their butt, don't eat it? Did the mom tell that little bird that? Yes or no? Well, how does that possum know when it hears a rattlesnake rattling? How does the possum know not to go near the rattlesnake? Because in the consciousness of creation of those creatures, over time, they carry with them this instinctual memory. Something that knows without having to think at all that certain colors, certain sounds, even shapes, that those things are hands off. Do not touch, danger. Hammer time if you pick it up. Yes or no? Well, if that's true, how come I'm so quick to pick up the hammer? Why is it that, look, I want to get this clear. We're talking about what we could call an impersonal, it clearly is, instinctual kind of fear, where those creatures know, don't mess with this. But for us, we know nothing at all about a natural, impersonal kind of reluctance to engage. For us, every form of fear. I was thinking about this. The fears that you and I have are culturally created. They're not natural, they're culturally created. What does that mean? I've been indoctrinated to believe that if I'm not this kind of person, if I don't act this way, if I don't have these possessions, if I don't have that kind of appearance, if people don't perceive me like this, I've been indoctrinated culturally to believe that if I don't live up to some religious morality by which I'm the most loving person in the world, if I'm not reborn or whatever the heck it is that you want to say responds to you, if I'm not that, then I need to be afraid of everything that shows me that I'm not. Yes or no? So that over time, which is fascinating, these negative reactions, including the justification of them, not only become cultural, but our culture perfects them. Imagine a culture that perfects fear. Now, is there such thing as a culture that perfects fear? Or is culture the expression of a consciousness manifested through time? Isn't that what culture is? So that means that our own consciousness is cultivating at all times, not just the fear, meaning the things we're identified with, but cultivating the reaction to those fears so that we become increasingly complicit with hammering ourselves, with trying to make everyone and everything that challenges the image we have of ourselves get out of the place they're in and into the proper place, because we're going to hammer at this until the world lines up, until you begin to be what I need you to be. Please tell me you see this. Imagine, because you see, it's an illusion. The culture is inseparable from the consciousness that creates it. So here we are always trying to change the culture by doing what? Making laws. Having new social descriptions, new ways we're supposed to interact. Don't trigger anybody. When you applaud, don't make noise. The insanity. And believing that somehow by changing the way I react outside of myself would change the consciousness that gives rise to those reactions, instead of recognizing that we have been conditioned and are continuing to be conditioned by a culture that we're creating. So we look into a mirror, we don't like the mirror, and we believe that we can change the mirror and not the nature that's reflected in it. We become perfectly conditioned to believe in our own negative or otherwise fearful reactions. Perfectly conditioned to believe in our own reactions. You want the proof of it? You are the proof of it. Because I guarantee you, I'm going to hear from people who say, well, you have to react. It's true. You have to respond. That's what life is. Active, passive reconciliation. But tell me where it is that the hammer comes into play. Tell me where it comes into play that hating yourself or despising another human being or insisting that someone be the way that you want them to be. You tell me where that comes into play, where it's anything other than a destructive force, where hammering on the nail, where my belief hammers on what I think is wrong with you, but what's wrong with you doesn't exist outside of my image and idea about how you should be. So I'm beating on myself every time I want something outside of myself to change, which is why nothing changes, incidentally. Are you able to see this with me? Please. And here's the point of everything we've been talking about, because we're getting close to the exercise. If it's true that does it take time to recognize a rattlesnake? A bear walks into your room, not your husband. He can be a bear, can't he? Or she can be quite the little scorpion. Human beings, what do you think? We have all of those creatures in us. And then here's this person, in that split second, do I need time to recognize their negativity? Does it take time to recognize any dangerous creature? Please, please, given that we are created with the capacity for instantaneous intuition, instinctual understanding that is not something just related to a single sense the body has, but connected to the whole body of awareness in which those senses operate. So the whole of my awareness is pre-prepared. It has within it the intelligence that knows what is dangerous and what is not. Yes or no? Then why don't we recognize without taking thought that picking up or stepping into a negative reaction is not just poisonous to ourselves, but to everyone else? I'm asking you, why don't I know that? Why am I not present? Why does that sarcastic remark come out of my mouth long before I know it? And not to mention how clever sometimes I think I am for hurting another human being with my wit. How is that possible? Unless somehow or other I picked up a hammer. And why do I pick up a hammer? Why would I ever say something cutting to another human being? Why would I do it? Please. But they deserve it. They did something that triggered the hammer. Or I have such an image of myself that I can't wait to express how clever I am through my comments. And is there really a me that's clever with these comments? Is there really someone outside of me who sets me up so that I pick up a hammer and try to put them and fix them? Is there? Or is all that one consciousness acting out itself and dividing itself up into me and you? You know the truth. I've been explaining it to you, haven't I? So let's put it together. What's the hammer? What's the hammer? The hammer is always some disappointed expectation. Oh, I perceive the moment the way it should be without knowing it. I see it that way. I'm identified with how it should go. And when it doesn't go, that event threatens me and I must somehow or other protect myself. That's the hammer, isn't it? Is the hammer outside of me? Hammer can't be separated from the consciousness that feels the imminent threat, that feels something's happened that disturbs it, yes or no? Because the hammer's going to fix everything. So there's the hammer. What's the nail? The nail doesn't exist apart from the identification with whatever it is that I believe you should be. So the hammer is part of my identity and the nail is part of my identity. Either this is inescapable to you or you've escaped the whole point of the talk. Are we hammering at home? The hammer is the unconscious nature that immediately interprets the meaning of a moment as a threat to its own best interest. That's the hammer. And when it perceives something that's threatened its own best interest, what does it do? It lashes out, picks the hammer. I feel the hammer. But what's being hammered in that moment? What's being hammered in that moment? The image I have that it shouldn't be like that. My idea, my thought hammers thought. Failing to see that the enemy that this consciousness sees as responsible for its pain is born of the attachment it has to its images and the corresponding sense of self, and the hammering starts. So what do you think the exercise is? What do you think the exercise is?
Drop the hammer.
Say it out loud.
Drop the hammer.
Perfect. That is the exercise. At the onset of any form of resistance, given whatever that moment is that we're called on. And incidentally, just for the sake of it, with the remaining few minutes, the moment is actually calling on you to pick up another set of tools. That's what the moment is actually asking. But you can't even begin to think, I need another set of tools, meaning another understanding of this moment, until you have seen quite clearly that you always pick up the same tool. What's the tool? Hammer. And what does the hammer try to do? Fix the problem. Where's the problem? In my perception. So my reaction is trying to release me, fix my own reaction, which it cannot do. So you said it. But let's make it super clear. You have no obligation whatsoever. You have no obligation whatsoever to respond to any negative reaction other than the responsibility of being aware of it as it moves through you. That's your only responsibility. Not what the reaction tells you. Your responsibility is the awareness of the reaction. That's the new tool. That's the new toolbox. And when you can be aware of the fact, and you will, how many of you have had a few moments, I know they're far and few between, where you've actually experienced that here you are having this negative reaction, that there is great pain in the negative reaction, and it doesn't matter how many times you've tried to pound somebody into the place they're supposed to be, it doesn't change. So there you are, and there's the reaction, there's the hammer, there's the nail, and you understand this cannot build anything but more bitterness, more conviction that the right response is to try to be, is cruelty. Put down the hammer. Not onto something, just drop it. Drop the nail. That's the most difficult part, because what's the nail? See, the hammer feels like me. I'm strong. I'm right. That's the good part of the hammer, isn't it? Instantaneously identified with the strength of being reactive. Yes or no? I'm not going to put that down, because that's who I am. And yet, if I understand that when I'm hammering, what's being hammered is the consciousness whacking itself, then the difficulty becomes understanding I have to give myself up. I can't put down the hammer, I can't put down the nail without laying myself down. And I'm not about to lay myself down until what? Until I see with absolute clarity that in the moment where that reaction, that resistance comes, and I start to get the feeling of, I gotta go, I gotta do, I gotta get, I gotta fix. In that moment, I need to do what? I need to be able to see that I'm about to pick up something poisonous to myself. That I'm about to do great harm to myself. I'm not gonna help myself with that hammer. That's what I believe, isn't it? No, I need to see the great harm in the relationship of being identified with that consciousness that believes it is hammer and doesn't know it's nail. Let me read the special writing to you. This describes the entire meeting. You can download it if you're watching, and I would urge you to read this at least once a day for a week until it begins to permeate this hammer-like consciousness. We are conditioned to accept without question the resistance we feel toward any unwanted moment, along with our subsequent negative reaction to it, as proof of the reason why that condition is to be feared, so that it never dawns on us, as it must if we're ever to be free. The real problem is not the condition we're given to see as responsible for our pain. Rather, this suffering is born of our unseen identification with some form of unconscious conditioning. And yet, it is within our growing awareness of this fact that we have been incarnated into and raised under the influence of an unconscious nature that continues to condition itself by trying to escape its own negative reactions, that we find the key to our liberation from the dark realm of its compulsive imaginings. So it is not a better dream that we need. What's needed is to awaken from the dreamer, wherein the realization that we must let go, sell all that we have been, is the same as our passage into a new order of being. every time you catch yourself about to have hammer time or feel the pain of the hammer, and instead of blaming the condition for the pain, recognize the only way you can feel the pain of that moment is because something in you is beating on you to try to get the moment to represent what you want. You do that, and in that split second, there will be a shift in this consciousness. And I'll take it one step further to end this talk. Your spiritual work, when you understand it, is a work of eternity. It isn't your consciousness that has the hammer, and it isn't your consciousness that has the nail. It is your consciousness that has the specific form of a hammer and a specific idea of the nail. But the consciousness goes on hammering itself, feeling the pain of the conflict it is within itself, and then tries to create a new culture based on what it imagines that pain to be produced by. So until you and I accept the responsibility and agree no longer to suffer the pain of the hammer and the nail, but rather the pain of setting the hammer and the nail down, because no greater love does a man have than that for his own brother, to lay himself down. When you lay the hammer down, you lay yourself down. And when you lay yourself down, you're laying down everything that you have been a participant in, that consciousness and all that it has created. And in laying down your participation in the conflict of that creation, you begin to bring about a healing in that creation and your place in it. Then all of humanity has a chance. All of the world has an opportunity to begin to see something that it can't. Because when you pick up the hammer, what does everyone else around you do the moment you start hitting the nail? What does everyone do the moment you throw that hammer? Throw the hammer back. So that everything is justified in that consciousness, because it produces the pain, and then it proves to itself someone else did it. And you have this violence, this circle of pain, instead of the circle of illumination, the circle of real regeneration that you and I are intended to participate in if we will just do our work. Let's take a break. We'll come back and have our dialogue.